The only time that ever happened was when I was taking the classes at Sur La Table before I went into Wolfgang's. So I'm taking these classes at Sur La Table because I want to go into Wolfgang's and not be a complete fool. So I'm still working SWAT. It's day watch, and we get a SWAT. And I'm supposed to have a sauce class at Sur La Table that night at 6 o'clock, 6 to 9. And we get a call up about 12 noon, barricaded suspect. Oh man, but it's 12 noon. I have 6 hours that we'll get this guy out and so fill the place full of tear gas and he'll come out. So we get to the site, and it's 3 robbery suspects that went into a house. Police were in pursuit of them. And first one they caught, the second one comes out, and the third one's not coming out. And I thought, okay, so it's now 2 o'clock. I still have 4 hours. I'm on a perimeter. It's now 3 o'clock. This isn't looking good. And I'm like balancing. This is like crazy to me. I'm balancing a SWAT call up with a cooking class. With a cooking class. And it's like, I'm at that point where I want to go to the cooking class. I've been through so many of these barricades. I want to go to my cooking class.
Welcome to the Transition Drill Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Pantiani. I appreciate you taking the time to watch. So let's get into this. Were you ever part of the instructor cadre that did the tactical training at the old Ambassador Hotel?
Wow. No, I remember training at the Ambassador Hotel, but no, I wasn't on the training cadre.
I just remember going to 2 of the training classes there, and from the geek side of me, what was more interesting was just the historic aspect of the hotel.
Yeah.
Going into the back and the bungalows, and hey, that was Marilyn Monroe's bungalow.
Yep.
Or going in, into the Coconut Grove and seeing the spot where Bobby Kennedy was shot,
yep.
or at least where they declared him dead. I just
down through the kitchen.
Yeah, and it was an amazing place from the historical standpoint to
I was there. We did a lot of training there. Because it was a closed down site. We were always looking for closed down sites that we could train in. So, yeah.
So where'd you grow up?
Grew up in North Hollywood, born and raised, still have my mom's house.
Do you come from a law enforcement or military family?
No, never did. I went to school for architecture, went through high school, went to college, Pierce College, and then I was going to go on to State College, again, keeping the architectural theme, because I love to draw. I draw freehand. I draw plans for houses. And when I was going through school, my architectural instructor got me a job working for an architect, a prominent architect in Sherman Oaks. And we did all kinds of stuff up in Mammoth. We did all kinds of stuff at Marina Del Rey, and he had about 3 or 4 draftsmen, 3 or 4 designers, head of both departments, and people weren't paying him. Clients weren't paying him. And I was, at that time, working a real minimum wage, about $2.25 an hour.
For some context, what year are we talking about?
We're talking 1970.
Okay.
Just
a few years ago.
And I, as much as I like to draw, I didn't like to worry where my next dollar was coming from. And so I wanted to get into something that was more secure, that was something that was exciting. And I never thought fire department, but I said, police department. And back then, the police shows, the Adam 12s, they were big time on TV.
As from the artistic side, do you have art in your family, or did it just kind of come naturally to you?
My mom was an artist, but she would do artwork, but it would never go out publicly. It was just what she liked to do. And I could always say, I got it from her. But now I'm still doing the artwork. And the funny thing is that I applied for the police department and I didn't tell her. And when I went through the interviews and finally I got my academy date for LAPD Academy, I told her, and she was upset, and she said, I'll never forget, she goes, if you don't make it through the academy, I'll kill you.
That's no pressure.
I said, okay, great. And then the funny thing was that after I came off probation, I started drawing again. I started designing houses, and I started my own business designing houses, and I was doing the police work, and I was also drawing. I had about 6 clients at one time where I was drawing houses, anything from room additions up to a 5,000 square foot house. And I had my structural engineer that would do the structural on it for me, the civil engineer, and then I would do the drawing. I was the draftsman that put 15, 20 some pages together and submit them for approval.
Do you still do that today?
No, because CAD came in. And CAD started the computer programs to be able to do that.
Computer assisted drafting or computer aided drafting?
I did not go through school for that, and I decided, you know what, I'm done.
1970, 71, that's Vietnam era. Did you end up going in the military or consider going in the military?
I considered it. That was in 1970, 71. I became a student worker right after the architectural gig. Then I went to Hollywood Division as a student worker, which is you're doing clerical work, planning where robberies, where burglaries are, trying to get a pattern down. And I had my academy date of January 25th, 1971. And when I went in, at that time they had deferments. And at that time I was a occupational deferment because they weren't taking police officers prior to that. Then all of a sudden, I was one of the first ones in the lottery. The lottery came up. I was in the academy. My number came up. I was number 150. And they were taking everybody. So I didn't want to lose my academy time. So I tried to go to Marines, Army, everyone I went to, every branch of the service, they turned me down. And I was going to go reserves. I wanted to go reserves. So I would only lose the 6 months. And they wouldn't take me because they said, we're taking 17, 18, 19, 20-year-olds. You're 21. You're way down on the list. But what happened is that because of the occupational deferment, it went through, and for whatever reason, I didn't get selected. And I stayed on the police department, eventually doing 35 years and 25 in SWAT. And people say, man, you don't have to do military for what you've been through.
Well, that's 35 years on the first career. We'll get to the second law enforcement career after a little bit down the road. So obviously, LAPD SWAT was the bulk of your career. Yeah,
and I didn't figure. Keep in mind, a lot of people, when I talk to people, that's, younger people. Yeah, I want to go in. I want to be a police officer. I want to get on the SWAT team. This is before they even have an idea of what it is. That wasn't my idea. I didn't go, and I just want to do. My whole career goal was to do 20 years, get to the rank of captain, stay in the street the whole time, get the rank of captain, 2025, and then retire. And I did part of that, where I stayed in the street the whole time. I never went the detective route. I never went behind a desk unless I was injured. So that part of it was fine. I went through, came out to Van Nuys Division. I transferred to Hollywood. In Hollywood, I worked patrol. I worked accident investigation. I worked vice. I went undercover. And then I decided, well, it's time to go on. After that came up, it's time to go someplace else. And I decided to go to Metro, because Metro was a division that was a home that you didn't have a home. I know that sounds kind of weird. It was you had a division, but you didn't have a home to call your own. And what Metropolitan Division is a task force division that covers the entire city of Los Angeles. And you're deployed, has 3 prominent platoons in Metropolitan Division. There's more than that. There's A, was administrative, B, which is boy platoon, which covers the certain area where you live, so that if you have to respond from home, you go to that area instead of driving all the way to another, jurisdiction. They have C platoon, which is another area south of the Santa Monica Hills, maybe Marina Del Rey, maybe Downey, maybe, everything south, Riverside, Pomona, everything over there. If you live there, that would be C platoon. And then they have D platoon, which is SWAT. And then that's a officers from any of the platoons. You have K9, and then they developed the mounted unit, which was another platoon that came in later.
You went mounted.
I did for a year.
A while.
I did.
Did you grow up around horses?
I did. I ever since I was a teenager, I'd have my mom would drive me over to a rental stables, Pickwick Stables over in Burbank, and I'd go riding for a couple hours. And to get a good horse, I would tell the guys that were renting the horses that I was an extra in at the movie studios, just down the street, and just had some time off.
And you could just go riding right off the stables into
the Hollywood Hills, into Griffith Park.
What made you come off mounted?
Well, what happened was when I was in boy platoon for 2 years, I decided that now it's time to do something else, and I wanted to go into SWAT. I didn't have any military background. I didn't know if I would be selected, and I was. They selected 2 guys, myself and another officer, and I was in SWAT for 7 years. And then when the mounted unit was a volunteer unit, it then went full-time in Metro. And when it went full-time, I decided, well, let me go try that now. So I went over in the mounted unit, and I was there. And I tell you what, the mounted unit was great. It was probably the second best job I ever had, first being in SWAT. To do police work on horseback was a lot of fun. It was challenging. You have to know how to ride. And the training, shooting at on the range off a horseback, it was challenging. It was, like I say, it was a lot of fun.
Did you or do you own horses still?
I did, all the way up until last year, until we had to put 2 of our horses down. Now I don't have any, but I've had horses for probably the last 40 years.
The horses you rode in Metro, were they LAPD's horses, or were they officers' personal horses?
It's a great question, because they were officers' personal horses prior to it going an LAPD volunteer mounted unit. So when they needed horses, you brought your own horse, you trailered them on your own to wherever the site was for the detail. And then when they went full-time in 88, 89, then the city purchased horses. They would have somebody that had the knowledge of horses go out, and they would be purchasing horses. The Amundsen Center and LAPD got together. Amundsen made a huge donation to LAPD, and which over in the Atwater district of Los Angeles, which is right next to Griffith Park, they put up a huge mounted unit barn, state-of-the-art facilities, and for 40 horses, and they started purchasing them.
We've all seen the old cowboy movies and even current movies where you see guys shooting off the back of a horse. But do horses naturally take to guns being fired around them, or
no?
Okay.
No, you know what? It's kind of funny, because horses, it depends really on where you get the horses, because if they're coming off a Colorado range, they're used to nothing. But when they come out here, and this is what happened once we got some new horses in, and I was on a horse, brand new horse, and it's a big open field, and at the other end of the field they put a black and white. And the idea was to ride your horse, walk your horse down towards the black and white, and halfway they turn the lights and siren on. And keeping in mind that horses are herd animals, they like being around other horses. As I was walking my horse down, this horse has never been around cars or anything, gets down and they turn the sirens on, and all of a sudden I'm in a rodeo. And this horse is bucking and doing everything. I'm trying to figure out how to get off the horse now so it's not going to do too much damage, and I wind up breaking 2 ribs.
Oh, wow.
But, I got back on, and at the end of the day, they sent me to ER to get fixed up. But you know what? It's, like I say, horses they're unique animals. When you get them around things and you put them through that training, just like officers have to go through training for different aspects of their job, horses have to go through training for different aspects of what they're going to come across. So we very ease them into positions around cars, into parks, around loud noises, and then we take them out to the range and we shoot off of them. And the whole idea is you don't want to shoot right next to their ear. You try to get it at some type of an angle to your target when you're going to wind up shooting.
I'm assuming, though, it's like with canines where the dogs from a young age are trained specifically related to working in law enforcement. Horses, I'm assuming, are broken and then introduced a little bit to the duties that they're going to do? Or is it basically you get a horse that's merely broken to the point it can be ridden?
You get a horse that's broken to where you can ride. And then depending upon where this horse came from, really depends on how much additional training that horse has to do. So we put together a gauntlet or firecrackers, or the gauntlet being maybe officers on the ground banging trash can lids. You have cars driving towards the horses, so they get used to this, so that when you do take them out, these are things that they are able to see and relate to as if it were training. They get used to that, as opposed to that horse that came in from Colorado, which they should have never done. They should have eased him in, and all of a sudden what's this, black and white
with these flashing lights,
flashing red and blue lights, screaming at me with a loud siren. What the heck animal is that? And so that was probably not the wisest thing for them to do, but they do try to ease them in with all the horses they get.
So being interested in owning horses, what took you out of the mounted unit?
It's not as exciting as SWAT. That's a simple answer. I decided to go back, and it was not easy going back because nobody had ever left SWAT and then wanted to come back. I had one sergeant that was on the team, did not want me to come back, not because of the person that I am, but because he said I showed a disloyalty to SWAT by leaving it. And that was a dissenting vote that the other one said, yeah, we can bring him back. And then there was, do we want to put him through the training that they had just implemented for new incoming officers? And one of the other sergeants said, yeah, we should. And the lieutenant that was in charge of the unit then said, no, we know what Rick can do. We know what he can't do. We're bringing him back. But they didn't bring him back right away. They made me do my penance, in which I'm living at that time out in Simi Valley in Ventura County, and they put me on C team, in which those officers are down in the Downey area or down way downtown south of where I live. So my drive time was my penance.
So for those who don't know the Southern California area, you were living basically northwest and you were assigned southeast.
Yep.
And as the crow flies, it may not be far on a map. In Southern California traffic, you need to pack a lunch.
Yeah, you do. You're spending half your time on the freeway before work and after work going home. And because I did live at the north end, I didn't have a take-home car. So I would drive into the academy and then hook up with my partners, that then we would go down to the south end. And our responsibility for C platoon was the Watts area, was South Central, was the areas, Newton Division. And that's not a problem, because once I went into SWAT, that's just about the only areas that we hit. But it was just a cultural change coming from where I was. And I did that for 7 months. And then they said, come back in. And then I stayed in SWAT for another 18 years.
You definitely had to have seen a huge change in tactics in deployment over, because going back a little bit, you mentioned that when you first put in for SWAT, you were one of the few guys that didn't have military experience. And so at that time, was that a bigger requirement or a greater requirement?
When SWAT kind of has done a 180. When SWAT first started back in the late 60s, it was Daryl Gates's idea. And he started it. He was a commander at that time as a result of the 1965 Watts riots. And at that time, there were people that were shooting at the firemen trying to put the fires out, and LAPD did not have any type of a unit to try and counter that. So that started. And what they did is when he started it, it was a volunteer unit, and they looked for people that had military background and that had their own weapons to be able to get called out. So they would go down to Camp Pendleton. They would do some training down there. They'd come back up. They had the military training of their own, and that's what was required when it first started. The 180-degree turnaround is when I went in. They are now well-trained, and they are actually at the point where they're going down and training. Well, this is after I had already been there. We were going down and training some of the military in CQB, or close quarters battle, in making entries, room entries. But in that transition, they being SWAT would actually prefer that you didn't have SWAT military background, so they could train you
how they
want you to do it. The basic, because I've done a lot of training with Navy SEALs. We've done a lot of training with Army, with a lot of the dev groups. The problem is that, not a problem, but the issue is that we're basically trained the same, but there is a difference in target recognition and when and how to address that.
From your perspective, how do I want to put this? Let me get back to that question. So how many years you did your first law enforcement career was 35 years? 35
years, 8 months.
And what was your I know you said your original plan was to promote to captain.
What happened? Yeah, really what happened. When I got into Metro, I did 2 years in one of the platoons and it was an exciting division to work. Metropolitan Division, like I say, doesn't have a home to call their own. What they do is they handle all the major demonstrations. They handle all the VIP protections. They handle all the VIP foreign dignitaries, national dignitaries that happen to come into the city. They handle all the stakeouts. So we blow into an area, we're there until the problem is solved, and then we move to another area. And then we solve that problem. It's as if you were a captain of a police department, of a precinct or a division. And you have a street robbery problem, but I have so many calls for service for my officers that we can't handle that. What do? I call Metropolitan Division's captain and I say, hey, well, here's my problem. I need extra officers. Those extra officers, okay, where is that problem? It's out in the valley. I call Boy Platoon because that's where they live, and they go handle that problem until it's gone. And where do we go next? Where are we needed next? So we bounce around so much. So therein lies the don't have a home to call your own, but at the same time, you're doing something different about every week, every 2 weeks. And then you throw in the training, and then you throw in the VIP protection, and then the motorcade. And then I decided after 2 years of that, I was going to try for SWAT. And when I got into SWAT, it was home. I didn't want to leave because that kind of training, we now take it up to where the other platoons don't handle barricaded suspects. They don't handle hostage rescue. They don't handle high-risk warrants. And it just adds that little more level of excitement into what I was doing.
Does being on SWAT hinder your ability to promote?
No, actually it helps it. And I've had some people say that I should have promoted to help train younger officers. And I looked at it like the other side of that coin is, yeah, you could be right, The other side of that coin is by keeping seasoned officers or seasoned SWAT officers within the unit, we're able to train the new SWAT officers coming in to keep our unit at a high level.
So as you were getting ready to exit out, what were you thinking was going to be your future?
Well, I wasn't figuring on exiting until my mom, she was in ill health. I love my mom to death, and she said that she wanted to see me retire. Because to this day, I've been retired since 2006. So for almost 15 years, whatever it is, I've missed it. I've missed the work. It's like a little kid in a man's world playing on helicopters, and how could you not like that? And so she wanted to see me retire, and I said, yeah, you bet. Prior to that, I'm thinking I'm working off-duty jobs, and one of the off-duty jobs I had as a police officer didn't have to be SWAT, but one of the off-duty jobs I had was setting up security for the governor's ball for the Oscars. And that is where I got to know Wolfgang Puck and his partner. So
this wasn't a direct assignment related to SWAT. This was an off-duty.
It's personal off-duty. You know what? They do it all the time. It's in Los Angeles. There's a lot of off-duty jobs that are available to be able to work. It's not related to police department, but they want police officers because of the type of work they're doing. And so I've been working the academy. This will probably be the first year that I don't work the Oscars at all. I've been doing something to do with the Oscars for, the last, 20, 30 years. Even before it was at Hollywood Highland, when it used to be at Dorothy Chandler Pavilion or wherever. I've been working them. It's easy detail.
So you basically, through that, got exposed to the cooking world.
Yeah. Yep, I sure did. I got to know the very first year that the Hollywood Highland facility where the Oscars are held, and they're held at that time it was called the Kodak Theater, which is now the Lowe's Theater. The Governor's Ball is right across the open courtyard from that, and that is where Wolfgang Puck has his kitchen. Wolfgang Puck's been doing these forever. So I got to know Matt Benzavenga, who was Wolfgang Puck's business partner and a culinary icon. And I got to talking to him one day about cooking, and we got to talking about how anybody can cook a steak, but it's a sauce you make with it you put on it, or with just about with anything, requires a sauce that really sets it off. I mean, even from your mac and cheese, the sauce that goes in that.
Nice segue. We'll get there.
And so he said, he asked me if I wanted to come in and come into the kitchen. And I didn't know. It's I'll admit to you, it's very intimidating going from law enforcement into another world, especially as culinary, into a 5-star culinary world that Wolfgang Puck has put together. He is probably the first chef that we look at Food Network today, and you have all the Bobby Flays and the Michael Simons and they own restaurants. But if you take a look back at who did it first, he was probably one of the first that was ever, and the real deal that was ever in it. Anyway, so I blew it off. I said, no way.
At that time, were you already peripherally interested in cooking?
I did a little bit. I could burn a burger better than anybody. I could probably a pork chop would come out like shoe leather.
So you didn't have this lifelong kind of home cook background.
No, but everybody, you have a little bit. Well, my mom cooked all the time. I mean, she's Italian. I'm 100% Italian. I'd watch her cook, but I didn't pick up, how do you do that? So I do have the love for cooking, but I didn't know how to do it. And I see him the following year, and we talk again. I was able to help him out with some issues about how the bomb squad wanted to go and do a sweep, but the bomb squad wanted to have everybody leave the kitchen. And he said, "Hey, Rick, we can't have everybody leave. We have to have, we have sauces going. We have food cooking." And I knew the guys in bomb squad. I said, "Hey, can we just leave some of the major chefs in there?" They said, "Yeah, not a problem." Did the sweep. Everything went well. And he offered me again, "Come on in." And I said, "Yeah, okay." And I blew it off. And then between the second year and the third year, I got to thinking, not everybody is offered that kind of an invite to come into a professional kitchen, high-end professional kitchen, for a high-end event. You don't get too much higher than cooking for the Oscars. And I said, I'm crazy if I don't at least I don't know what he wanted. I don't know if he was going to, "Hey, you want to show me around?" I had no idea what was expected. And I didn't ask. That's my fault. But I didn't want to turn him down again because he became such a good friend. So I decided to start going to Sur La Table group classes. Every week, I would go to a group class that Sur La Table was putting on, and this was just to learn how to hold a knife. This is to learn what braising was as opposed to what frying was, which was sautéing, and prior to that, I didn't know what braising was. I didn't know, like I say, throw a burger on, wait till it turns a different color, and you pull it off, So I learned a lot.
Did you take that in the sense of, so how far from retirement were you when you started doing this?
Probably my last year.
Okay. Were you thinking that was going to be a career option, or was it just simply something you were learning?
I thought of it as being something I was learning until I was like the fish that the guy was fishing for, and I got hooked. I got hooked. When I went in, the third year came up. I decided, okay, I see Matt. He said, you going to come in? I said, "Chef, you bet." And when my end of watch came around at 2 p.m, 1400, I went in the kitchen. And I'm thinking he's going to give me a walkthrough. Instead, he throws me my Wolfgang Puck chef whites. He goes, "Go back to sauces and see what you can do." And I thought, oh man. And I went back and talked to the sauce chef. He told him who I was. As far as Matt brought me in, he goes, here's a recipe I want you to make. And time out, let's talk. And
now, are you being directed to prepare something for the governor's ball, or is this another event?
Well, what they do is they have the governor's ball, which is obviously after the Oscars, but the day before and the 2 days before, they're making food for the people that are working there, that are setting it up for all the workers. Also, one of the things I learned is that for the governor's ball, and this is even up until today, and this is when I decided, when I got hooked, and I say I got hooked on it, I started my own catering business, and with my wife. And then what happens is you don't cook everything for the governor's ball in one day. You have what we call do-aheads. What can we do ahead of time that we'll keep, that we can then use for the governor's ball? So your sauces can all be made a day, 2 days ahead of time and kept in the refrigerator. There's certain things, all your garnishes can be diced and depending on what they are, can be prepped day, 2 days ahead of time. So these are all the things that you have to have a lot of chefs to be able to do before you get to that day of the show, to where then you're going to do the protein. And then I also learned how to do proteins, your tri-tips, your fish, whatever, the day ahead of time, and then do it the day of, and you'd never know it was done the day before. And that's where it's like, this is amazing. But how they do this.
You're doing all of this while you're still active LAPD, active LA SWAT.
I was. It was a juggling act.
So where did you get 27 hours into a day?
No, what I did was I would be doing that on a day off. So my days off were in Wolfgang Puck's. My work days were at work. The only problem was I had to make sure that when I was going into Wolfgang's, I wasn't on standby. So because there could be a little bit of a problem.
Did work and training ever collide? Or work and learning
wow.
to cook ever collide?
The only time that ever happened was when I was taking the classes at Sur La Table before I went into Wolfgang's. So I'm taking these classes at Sur La Table because I want to go into Wolfgang's and not be a complete fool. So I'm still working SWAT. It's day watch, and we get a SWAT. And I'm supposed to have a sauce class at Sur La Table that night at 6 o'clock, 6 to 9. And we get a call at about 12 noon, barricaded suspect. Oh man, but it's 12 noon. I have 6 hours that we'll get this guy out and so fill the place full of tear gas and he'll come out. So we get to the site, and it's 3 robbery suspects that went into a house. Police were in pursuit of them. And first one they caught, the second one comes out, and the third one's not coming out. And I thought, okay, so it's now 2 o'clock. I still have 4 hours. I'm on a perimeter. It's now 3 o'clock. This isn't looking good. And I'm like balancing. This is like crazy to me. I'm balancing a SWAT call up with a cooking class. With a cooking class. And it's like, I'm at that point where I want to go to the cooking class. I've been through so many of these barricades. I want to go to my cooking class. And we put tear gas in the place, and he still didn't come out. And then they needed somebody, me being the smallest guy on the team, they needed somebody to go up in the attic. I said, I'll go, because if I catch this guy, I'm going to push him through the ceiling. He's going to know that we're there because he kept me from my cooking class.
Did you ultimately get
I went up, I found him up in the attic. Yes. He was sucking air through one of the roof vents.
Going backwards just real quick, something I want to ask. When the early days of SWAT, was all entries dynamic and then progressed more to stealth entry, or did you guys always kind of balance it out?
It really depended upon what we were doing. So if it were something that we wanted to prevent the destruction of evidence, then it would be dynamic. If it were something that we were looking for a 187, which is a murder, a homicide suspect, can't flush that down the toilet. Can't dump that in the sink. So that would be a surround and call out, get everybody out. We might have to go in dynamic if they don't come out. We might go in stealth. It really depends on the situation to where the tactics we would use. And that would be up to the element leader or team leader to decide which way to go and how to solve that problem.
Got it. So back to your cooking. Did you ever get to a point where you were cooking full time after your retirement?
Yeah, I went in, started cooking at Wolfgang's. See, now keep in mind that that his catering kitchen is there 24/7. It's always open, except for on Sundays. I take that back. So 6 days a week it's open. Oscars or not, they're always doing parties. They have conventions up there. So it would really depend on how busy they were as to whether I was going in all the time. If they had an event coming up, I'd work 3-4 days prior to the event. And I can remember I was doing plating. I went from just being prep to where one day I went in to work just prior to the Oscars. They'd have 300 chefs in there and working in his kitchen. His kitchen's huge. And I remember Matt called me into his office and said, here's some paperwork. We need to have you fill it out. And I looked at it and they were W-4s. And I thought, because at that time when I was in there, I was going there a lot. It was almost like an apprenticeship. For a year, I was just going in on my own time and I wasn't getting reimbursed for it. But the way I looked at it is I'm learning how to do this, that it's this passion that I have found in cooking, that I decided I'm going to take this. I'm going to take this as far as I can. And he's handed me the W-4s. He says, we're hiring you. We're hiring you as one of our chefs. And I said, you're kidding. He said, no, fill out the paperwork and get to work. So he goes, I've got stuff I want you to cook.
And on top of this, you're running your own catering business.
On top of this, no, actually the catering business, yeah, no, really, come to think of it, it wasn't a big business, but it was, people got to know that my wife and she's a much better cook than I am. We decided to start doing some catering, and we were doing that for friends. And then the word got out to where we start doing for other. Well, somebody told me that you guys cook. Can you do this, that? And the problem with the catering business is that everybody, and this is going to sound bad, but everybody wants something for nothing. So in other words, we got to the point real quick on asking somebody, what's your budget? Because they said, well, can you cook this, this, and this? We can cook anything, because we did not have a limit on what to do. We went to culinary school. Let me back up a little bit. While I was at Wolfgang's, no formal culinary experience, I asked Matt again, Chef Matt. I said, Matt, I want to go to culinary school. I said, I love this stuff. And so he directed me on which way to go. And I grabbed my girlfriend at the time, who became my wife. And I said, come on, we're going to culinary school. And so we went to culinary school upon his direction. And
was he recommending it, or was this where you felt you needed it?
No, he said, I said, well, I want to go. And he said, he even said, don't go to Cordon Bleu. Don't go to Pasadena, whatever it was. It was a Cordon Bleu, I think, in Pasadena. He goes, they charge way too much. You pay $50,000 at that time. This is back in the 90s. Yeah, he said, he goes, it's way too much. He goes, find this person, work with Wolfgang Puck. She teaches classes. Cecilia De Castro, find her. She's a chef and she teaches classes. She is phenomenal. And so as it turns out, she's teaching the classes not far from where we lived. And so another close friend of mine who was a chef, he suggested the same person, and these two people didn't know each other, and they suggested the same person. So it was an accelerated class in which we went 1-2 days a week, and it was like 5 hours, and it was a fraction of what the cost was.
But I'm assuming you would have probably needed some sort of recommendation by a known chef to get.
Well, we told Cecilia that we knew Matt. He recommended us. He told us about her, and she said, "Yeah, you're fine. Come on."
So with that, you've now ended up on TV cooking. Why don't you tell me about that experience?
Well, so I'm doing the Wolfgang Puck stuff and enjoying it. And my wife didn't enjoy the getting slammed so much, at Wolfgang's. Before I forget, we're doing the Oscars at one time, and we were asked if we would like to do the hotline. Hotline is where the burners are, and there's only about 7 chefs on that line. Everybody else is prepping or doing food. And one of the head chefs came up and says, Rick, would you like to, you and Chris, this is before I married her, said, would you and Chris like to work the hotline? And only executive chefs get that. And I said, yeah, you bet. I said, what are we going to do? And she goes, you're going to do Wolfgang Puck's baked potatoes, his signature baked potato. And I'll never forget this. We did 350 baked potatoes in 45 minutes, something like that. Because they come out, we have trays of them, they're coming out, and cross-cut the top foil and pop it open, and you butter it and creme fraiche it and caviar on top, and we're doing them. And Chef Matt's going along the line, and he goes, you guys are doing, he goes, slow down. You're actually pushing out too much. And as soon as he goes by, Wolfgang comes by and he goes,
speed it up.
He looks at Chris and he goes, sweetheart, they want my potatoes, more potatoes. I kid her to this day about that. She goes, ah.
How long does it take to build calluses up to be able to touch that hot food? Because you don't really have the time to.
You really don't. It's and the cooking industry has come a long way since then, because then we didn't have to wear gloves. Now they have to double glove if anytime you're using a knife, you didn't have to have a cut glove on. Now you do. So that's come a long way. But yeah, they were hot. She was like burning her fingers with double gloves on. Anyway, so sorry I got off on that tangent.
That's okay.
So I love my daughter. My daughter, I went through a divorce when she was 3 years old. Was not my idea. And she's kind of like been what's held me together, because the last thing anybody wants to think of is losing their family. And that's what I felt. I felt like I was losing my daughter. And I had to do some real soul searching at that point on what direction I was going to go in. And if it weren't for her at 3 years old, then I wouldn't be here. And so
Was
now
stepping away from law enforcement ever a consideration?
No. So she, so now this is a number of years ago, she watches a show on Food Network, which was done by Guy Fieri, which was called Ultimate Recipe Showdown. And it was the second season of it. She said, Dad, I watched the first season. And she at that time was about 21 years old. So it's about, she's about 23. So this is about 14 years ago. And she says, Dad, you got to do this. You got to do this show. And I said, no, Heather. I said, no, I don't. I really don't. He goes, yes, you do. For me, will you do it? Oh, for the love. All right. So the last day to enter recipes, the whole premise of the show, thousands of people enter recipes, and then they cook that recipe on stage for people, for contestants, and then they present the dishes in front of the judges. So I said, okay, so the last night that they accept, the last day, it's at night that they accept the applications. I'm looking at the categories, and I put this pasta dish through, and I have gone to the Ventura County Fair and won, and I set other dishes and pastries through and applications on the internet. And I come to the last category, which is comfort food, and I thought, oh man. So I build a mac and cheese recipe on paper, never cooking it before. I build it on paper and submit it. Call my daughter the next day, sweetheart, we're done. I submitted them, and she was happy about that.
Were you required to submit multiple dishes?
You could. You didn't have to. But yeah, you submit more, you have a better opportunity. So I don't hear from him. About 2 months later, I'm putting a running relay race together for the Police Memorial Relay up at LAPD Academy. And I get a phone message from Food Network. Give us a call. I listened to the message. We need to talk to you regarding one of your recipes. I thought, oh my God, I completely forgot about all that stuff. So I called him. First thing I did was I called Jet Tila. Jet was the guy I was talking about. He's a very good friend of mine who is now on Food Network all the time. And at that time, he wasn't. And I called him and I said, hey, Jet, I said, got a call from Food Network. He goes, you're kidding. I said, no. He goes, you got to talk about a shootout that I was in the prior year. This is in 97. So this was about this is about a year after North Hollywood shootout that I was involved in. And so it was 98. And so he said, you got to bring that up somehow because they will love that.
So as a nice segue right now, and I wasn't sure if I was going to bring this up or not because I'm sure you've had to retell this story a million times. But if there's any of my guests who are too young to remember the North Hollywood shootout, give us a brief rundown of it.
North Hollywood shootout was two bad guys that were dressed in body armor that had started doing bank robberies the prior year of 97. They were doing bank robberies in 96, armored car robberies the year before that, in which an armored car driver was killed. The FBI, Los Angeles is the bank robbery capital of the world at that time. And the thing that ran the flag up the flagpole with them was that they were using armor-piercing rounds. And armor-piercing rounds are not readily available. You don't just walk into a corner gun store and say, I want armor-piercing rounds. And they were using fully automatic weapons, drum magazines, and they were takeover bandits. And they did 2 bank robberies in which they got about $900,000, $800,000 from each bank robbery. And so the FBI got a hold of LAPD SWAT, and we started doing stakeouts in 96. And hitting only Bank of America's. And so a couple months went by, we were doing stakeouts, and they were nowhere to be found. They all of a sudden surface in North Hollywood at a Bank of America, and they hit a B of A just at the same time that we being myself, about 2 or 3 other officers. And this is in February. A matter of fact, the 25-year anniversary of that is coming up end of this month. We're getting ready to go out for a relay race that we're getting ready for, Baker to Vegas. We're getting ready for that. We're training, and we hear that there's a bank robbery at a North Hollywood Bank of America. We get in our own cars. We all have our own they were black and whites at that time. And we're heading down there, and I'll never forget that our sergeant gets on the air, and he says, these are the guys we're looking for from last year. He said they are heavily armed, and I'll never forget, the one thing that law enforcement officers never like to hear is that there's an officer down. Military, same thing. You don't like to hear that one of your comrades, one of your buddies, one of your family members are down. And he said, we have 5 to 7 officers down. Don't know if they're down and dead, don't know if they're just injured. And he said, you guys are going to go down and solve the problem. Going to go down and get eyes on the suspect, get eyes on the people that are down, start doing rescues. And that's where you really start thinking, the business that you're in. Get down there, long story short.
Well, and I'm just going to briefly jump in and say that for those that don't know about this incident, on top of all this, it's being broadcasted on every news source because it wasn't a 5 or 10 minute thing. This was a protracted event. So
suspects were takeover bandits. They walk into the Bank of America. They would shoot rounds up in the ceiling. They take over the bank. They take money out of the vault and then get out. They knew how much time they had. They did their homework. They knew they could only be in a bank for 8 minutes. They had stopwatches attached to their gloves that they had on, attached to a lanyard. And there's one photo of one of the suspects throwing the lanyard out and then catching the stopwatch. And they knew what kind of, only in LA, so they knew what kind of ammo, what kind of weapons that LAPD carried at the time. Shotguns with a double-aught buck that would spread after 15 yards. You might be hitting something, a mile
completely
away.
Ineffective.
Yeah, completely ineffective. 38s and 9mm, and that was it out of pistols, out of wheel guns or revolvers and semi-automatic 9mm, and that was it. So they knew that's all LAPD had. So they had body armor to prevent that. So in other words, they were not going to give up as soon as they got confronted because of the body armor. They had AK-47s with drum mags. They had an HK-91, which was a sniper rifle. They also had, this is in the trunk of their car, they also had a Bushmaster M15 with a double drum mag, which was 50 rounds each mag. So that's 100 rounds in their car. They had over 1,000 rounds of ammo on them. And as they're getting out of their car at the Bank of America in North Hollywood, they start to walk up Laurel Canyon, the one street and that the bank's on, and a black and white goes by that is responding to a business dispute unrelated to the bank. And as they drive by the bank, they see these 2 guys walking in, and they look over and go, whoa, and basically wind up watching a 211 or a robbery in progress. And they put out the assistance call. They hear the gunfire go off. Remember, takeover bandits, rounds going off inside the bank. The lady didn't move fast enough. One of them butt stroked her to the ground. And they became a victim of their own crime in that the armored cars, money isn't stored in the banks overnight. It's all pulled out of from armored cars and driven downtown to reserve downtown. In the morning, it goes back out. Evening, it goes back to the reserve. So because there were almost $1 million, both bank robberies, they decided just to deliver $400,000 in the morning, and they would make another trip, deliver another $4,000 at noon, and that way they wouldn't have so much money in the bank. Well, when they got in the bank, they were in there too long. Plus, they were seen going in the bank.
Right.
They got very upset, and the black and whites surrounded the bank, and they felt they were in time to leave. They only had 325,000, I think. And as they were walking out, they saw all the police officers everywhere. And they just started lighting up anything that was in their way. One black and white in the intersection where the bank was got hit 57 times. And the sergeant that was behind that was shot 2 separate times, once in the morning and then once a little bit later. This robbery, when you think about a shooting usually only lasts a couple of minutes and it's over. I don't care what shooting it is, unless it's a running gun battle. But they usually only last a couple of minutes. This was 45 minutes, last 45 minutes. Our shooting lasted 2 minutes of constant just shooting back and forth, which is a long time when you think about it. If you sit and look at your watch and time how long 2 minutes is,
a long time.
It's a long time. So we were en route. We're told that these are the suspects we wanted. These guys had come out. They're shooting it up. They're going to try to make a getaway. And we jump off the freeway, and it sounded like a war zone. I'll never forget it. It sounded like a war zone in that you could hear the different report from police officers' guns and the AK-47s. And the absence of movement on the streets, no cars, no pedestrians. And then you add on top of that, the 4 of us got there, and there were only 4 of us that could respond to it because we came from the academy. We all got in one black and white, and the police cars that were empty, that were shot up as we made our way around towards the bank was. We come up to a couple of detectives. They tell us the suspects are on the other side of the bank. And that's when one of our officers jumps out. He sees an armored car. He goes and commandeers the armored car and starts doing downed officer rescues of the officers that have been shot. The 3 of us get back into a black and white. This is where my heart hits the ground a second time, is that as we're going by the front of the bank, I'm in the back seat. I want to try and provide cover if somebody comes out. And I go to hit the button on the window to have it come down, and it only comes down about 3 inches because it's childproof. Who would think the back windows of a black and white police car are childproof? And we make our way around the corner onto Archwood, and police officers, uniform officers, are pointing down the street. What's happened is one of the officers on foot, and there's one officer in the car. One officer in the car is driving down Archwood, tries to carjack a couple of cars that are coming at him. The officer that is on foot, he gets shot in the hand, drops his gun, picks it up. Or let me back up. He has a malfunction with his AK. It's a stovepipe. In other words, the round didn't clear the ejection port. And so apparently he didn't know how to clear it because that's an easy malfunction. And he picks up a gun, puts it under his chin, pulls the trigger. He had already been shot 23 times in the body armor with no penetration. And so he takes his own life. We head down the street and come across our last suspect.
For those that want to go and there's videos out there. You can watch all this.
There was a movie that was made. Yeah.
Let's just hit on the best part of the whole thing. Your appearance coming out of the car.
Oh, so we come up on the car and we see the suspect. He shoots in our direction as we're pulling up on the car. It's kind of funny, excuse my expression. All 3 of us at the same time say, oh shit, that's a suspect. Because we really weren't looking for the suspect. We were looking for downed officers. We heard there were 7 that were shot. In reality, I think 11 wound up getting shot on that day. And if it weren't for the training, and I stress this so much to law enforcement officers, I debrief this thing, and this debrief can go anywhere from an hour to 8 hours to where I show videos. You have to train, and what you take into any gun battle, and this is with the military too. If you take into any gun battle, you take into that gun battle what you train to do. I don't care what it is. You can't just take somebody off the street and say, hey, go do it. You have to train them for what they're going to do. And if it weren't for our training, to where it is so intense, the training, to where we didn't have to think, well, what do I do next? Will I do this? Will I do this? Well, the situation presents this. Donnie turns the driver of the car, police officer, turns the car at an angle, which gives us a safe side to get out on the other side. Steve, as he's the right front passenger officer, he puts gunfire down, and we have 223s. Nobody else did except for the suspects. He put some gunfire down that drives the suspect, while he's still seated in the car, drives the suspect to the opposite side of his car. And then we all crawl out of our cars the way you're supposed to, low profile. And one officer goes to the front of the car, and myself and the other officer, we go to the back of the car. And the suspect is shooting at us. We're shooting back. We can't see him. We can hear his gunfire. And then all of a sudden I decided I was going to look under the car to see where he was, because I didn't want him to come up around us. So I look under the car, and I could see his feet. And I was once told, makes sense, that you shoot at any part of the suspect that you have in the view as long as he's a threat. And I did. I hit him 3 times in the ankle. My partners dropped down, and we then continue with the gun battle. And we weren't skipping rounds. We were line of sight, line of fire. And we kept shooting until he stopped shooting at us. And once he stopped, one of the officers towards the front said he's dropped his gun. We stopped right away.
For somebody watching on the video, you're the one who prones out at the back of the car. You're very easy to identify because you're the ones in shorts.
I'm not. Actually, that was the officer in the front of the car.
Really?
Yeah, I'm not one of the, everybody thought that. You're the guy that was in the shorts. No, I was not the one in the shorts. But you know what? I took a lot of heat for that for him.
So you worked, Jet tells you to work this same story into your Food Network TV aspect. So
I called Food Network, and I said, they said, we need to do a little interview with you right now over the phone. And I said, and this is just about where I'm getting ready to retire. I mean, we're talking only a couple months away now. And I said, it's kind of funny that I'm cooking now for the same. I said, not long ago, I'm involved in a major shootout, and now I'm cooking. And they said, oh, tell us about that. So I told them, and they said, well, we need a 3-minute video of you, not cooking, a 3-minute video of you just showing us basically what you do. And so on the phone, I tell Jet, I said, hey, we got to do a video. And he says, not a problem. So I come up with the idea. He is going to film this. And we're at Hogan's Alley. All Hogan's Alleys across the nation are all the same. You got storefronts, you got doors, buildings. So I'm dressed in my SWAT stuff. He is not on, Jet's not on scene. He is the cameraman, and I'm looking right at him. And I said, come on, partner. We got to stop him. We got to stop him now. And I kick the door open, and I go in, and I crank off with my 223 blanks. I crank off a couple, and he is alongside of me filming me. I crank off a couple rounds, and I said, drop it now. I said, those are warning shots. I told you never to serve raw chicken. And he pans to my target, which is a mannequin dressed in chef whites holding a rubber chicken. And then I look at the camera and I said, welcome to my world, Food Network. This is what I do for a living. And question answer. And they said, great. You've made the cut of 5. We're going to cut it 1 more. You have to give us. Oh, let me back up. When I called Food Network right off the bat, I was expecting him to say that, oh, your shrimp linguine was great. I said, what recipe are you looking for that you found? And they said, your mac and cheese. I said, you got to be kidding. He said, no. He said, that's what we're calling for, your mac and cheese. It was great. I'd never made it before. And I didn't tell them.
So they took your recipe and made it.
They took 14,000 recipes and made them all.
Wow.
And they said, yours stood out above all of them. And he goes, so you have 5 people. You have to do 1 more speed round that you can do in 30 minutes. That is for comfort food. And the thing that helped me with that was with the whole mac and cheese thing. Remember, I said that we built this thing you've got to add flavor. One thing I learned at Wolfgang Puck's, you build flavor wherever you can. So it's not just melted cheese over some noodles. You build a roux, which is a thickening agent that thickens your sauce. Your sauce is a bechamel, which is a French term for a milk sauce. I learned all this stuff at Wolfgang's. And so that's what I'm doing. So I build this, and a roux is fat and flour. Well, butter is fat, but what else is there that's fat? Bacon. Everybody loves, most everybody, well, you should love bacon anyway. So I take bacon, and I've learned that I take that and I render that, chop it all up, and I use that bacon fat with some butter, basically make a roux, make my bechamel sauce, and I add 5 cheeses. And I'm thinking, what cheeses do I want to add? This is when I was building this recipe in my head, and
not thinking it was actually gonna.
Oh, heck no! I'm making my daughter happy, right? So I do a fontina because it's a good melting cheese, and you can look this recipe up. It's still on Food Network's website. I had to sign it over to them, but if you look up my name, Rick Massa, and then go to 5 cheese mac and cheese, you'll find it. And I went ahead and I did for a speed round, I was going to do a country fried steak or, something that was very Southern, something that was and I didn't like any of it. I thought, what is,
because there's no way you're going to do this mac and cheese in 30 minutes.
No, the mac and cheese was for the main thing. So that's an hour. I get an hour to do that. So I have to do a comfort food that is 30 minutes, speed round, 30 minutes. I'll do a grilled cheese sandwich with tomato soup. Grilled cheese sandwich. I decided it's not just butter and cheese, and then you fry it. On the outside, you build the flavor up. You build the butter up. You make a compound butter. You let your butter soften. You add some Parmesan cheese to it, some Dijon mustard to it. You mix that all together. You spread that on the outside, and then you do it. And I used applewood smoked bacon on the inside and some heirloom tomatoes. And so when I went, and they said, "Hey, you made it. You're one of the 4. We're going to fly you out here to New York. You're going to be on." And I thought, and one of the questions they asked is, and when they decided, they came out to my house, they videoed me, and I told them right up front. They asked me a question: how does all the lights with the cameras, how do you think you're going to be able to react to that? And I said, please don't put this on. I don't want to sound cocky, but I said, you got to come into my world, to where 25 years I've been dodging bullets and talking to people that want to kill someone. I said, this is just cooking. I said, that's what I'm doing. I'm cooking.
Were the other competitors you were going against in that final 4, were they professional chefs?
No, they were, one lady was a professional competitor. Keeping in mind, I wasn't a professional chef at that time. I was only in Wolfgang Puck's learning. I hadn't signed any. At that time, I wasn't hired by them.
Right, that's what I was trying to get at. Were they putting you up against seasoned professional chefs?
The only girl that was seasoned was that she would enter all these competitions, and she was a big-time winner. And they even asked me, how do you think you're going to do against her, in a pre-show interview? And I said, I don't know who she is. I'm sorry, I don't know. I didn't even know what the prize was going into it. I was just going to cook. That's how much I enjoyed cooking, and to make my daughter happy that I was going. And then I wind up competing on it. And that's where I first met Guy Fieri. And I tell you what, my bad. I always thought, here's this guy, spiked, bleached hair. He's got all these spiked, jewelry on or whatever. And he came up to me. This is just after North Hollywood. And he came up to me and he introduces himself to all the other competitors just before we shoot. And he goes, just keep in mind, all of you are winners for being here. Out of 14,000, we got the 4. And he came up to me and he did a knuckle punch and he says, I know all about you. He goes, you're one badass. I thought, holy crap. And we've stayed good friends. And I wound up winning the whole show. And it was just because of my daughter.
Now, from that, did it spark any opportunities to continue cooking on TV, or any? Did you go down the lights and camera
No, the white lights and camera didn't do anything for me. You know, I've been around. When I get a microphone shoved into my mouth or in my face from the news media at a SWAT call-up before I'm getting ready to make an entry or something, you know, that's why I say, I don't want to sound cocky, but it's something I was doing for, you have that happen. There was one year we handled over 300 call-ups in one year.
No, I just meant from winning that competition, did they give you any other opportunities? But
Guy Fieri has reached out to me, and even today we still talk. We still meet each other. He invites me to his show now that's called Tournament of Champions. It's big time on Food Network. They just got through filming. He has asked me to go on Guy's Grocery Games, and I've said no. And he even at one point had his office call me. He said, "This is Guy Fieri's office. You know, we want to programming you for next season. When can you come up here?" I said, "I can't." And it's not that I don't want to. And I told him, we were walking off his Tournament of Champions set once, and because he is so pro-police. That's what I was going with. He is extremely pro-police. He is extremely pro-fire department. He is extremely pro-military. He's amazing in that regards. And so I told him, he says, "When are you going to come on my show?" And I said, "Quite honestly, Chef, I don't know what I would do with baby food." If anybody has watched it, you got to watch his show. It's like a zinger. You got to cook with different stuff. It's not, you don't pick your stuff out. And he started laughing. He looked at me, he goes, "Man," he goes, "You're way overthinking it. You're way overthinking it." And so I've bowed out. You know, it's at this point, I enjoy cooking. I enjoy competing. You know, coming from the job, being a police officer, you compete. I enjoy competing in cooking. But I don't enjoy trying to figure out what I'm going to do with baby food.
So keeping that going, you still are involved with teaching and cooking, but for children.
Yeah, I was given an opportunity some time ago to teach kids, kindergarten and upper class, an after-school program at a private school, private Christian school out in Santa Clarita Valley. And I took it, and I grabbed my daughter, who's a great person to push me all through all this stuff. And she's older now than what she was. Then she pushed me into into Guy Fieri's thing. But yeah, so I teach an after-school class. It's 1 hour for kindergarten, about 12 kids. And it's about another 12 to 14 kids for the upper grades, which would be first grade through sixth grade. And we teach anywhere from a 7-week to a 10-week course, depending upon what the time of the year it is. And I love it. We're doing everything from just basics to teaching these kindergarten kids who don't even know how many eggs are in a dozen. We teach them how to make scrambled eggs. We teach everything's hands-on, because they really don't learn much if they're just watching you put stuff together, as opposed to where they're putting it together themselves. And I found that they really enjoy it. And the biggest reward that I get from this is when I have a student come back to me the following semester and say, "I had my girlfriend over and we made the puff pastry squares. It was amazing." And that means that I've taught her something with cooking that she's able to do at home on her own. And that is the reward that we get.
COVID impacted that much?
COVID canceled us for one semester, and the following, even up to this last semester that just ended, we're just going into our next semester at the end of this week in February, to where we wear masks. I have all the kids, and I used to have the kids wear gloves anyway, depending upon what we're working with. But as far as cancellations, we only canceled one semester, so it wasn't too bad.
So jumping over now, you mentioned competing. You like the competition aspect. You've alluded to at one point in time training for Baker to Vegas and running. You've started a new law enforcement relay race.
My partner was, there was three of us, and the other two guys, they used to put Baker to Vegas on. And as a result of the contract came to an end, they didn't rehire him, either one of them. And so we decided that we were going to put our own race on. COVID canceled their race, Baker to Vegas 1 year, canceled it the next year. And this last year in 2021, at the end of 2020, my partner and I decided, let's put our own race on.
Now, just a little background for those that don't know. Baker to Vegas, it's the town of Baker to the city of Vegas. It's a 120 miles, 20 segments, varying distances.
All law enforcement.
All law enforcement. And it's been going...
Well, it first started...
It went to Death Valley the first couple of years, right?
The first year, a SWAT team started it. And they decided, LAPD SWAT, they started it in 1979. And they wanted to see if they could go enter the Guinness Book of World Records for the longest relay race in Death Valley. And they would start up at Scotty's Castle, which is the north boundary of Death Valley, and run all the way through Death Valley and finish at the next border of Death Valley. And they would just run, if you and I were partners, we wouldn't go any faster than the slower between the two of us. And that was 18 runners that would do that. And they did it. And then they decided to open it up. And they opened it up to where it wasn't just you and I running as partners, but now it's a relay race. And they had something like 7 teams, 11 teams. And that was in 1980. And that was the first time I ran it, because that's about the year I went into Metropolitan Division. And so it was the Death Valley Relay, and it was there for about 6-7 years. And then about 85, about 5 years, about 1985, the federal parks people came to us and said, hey, park rangers, at 35 teams, you have too many teams in it, you have to leave. So then they wanted to keep the desert running. So they would start right at Baker High School in the desert and run Baker, California, up through the back hills and finish in the middle of nowhere. And then that got pushed, the start line got pushed further out. They added 2 more legs to where now it finished in Las Vegas, hence Baker to Vegas.
And it's been today, the most recent event, you're probably talking 240, 250 teams, I believe. The
last one that was canceled that my partner was putting on, and it came right up to the date, and then it was canceled, had 300 teams in it. So we decided, okay, we're going to continue this. He wasn't rehired. We're going to continue this on our own. Not sour grapes, but we just wanted to do our own race. And we wanted to do something different. We don't want to be associated with Baker to Vegas. We don't want people to think that we were doing this, as spoiled children or whatever. So we're going to do something different. We're still going to keep the desert running. Starts in Henderson, California, and it's on a bike path, River Mountain Loop Trail.
Henderson, California, or Henderson, Nevada?
Henderson, Nevada.
Okay.
So it's 23 miles south of Las Vegas. The host hotel is the Las Vegas Hilton Resort Spa. Beautiful place, no gaming, bring family. It's got a beach all of its own, and that's the start-finish line, and the entire race is on a bicycle trail. Now, when I say trail, it's paved. It's 48 miles of paved bicycle trail that goes all the way through Henderson, through Boulder, along Lake Mead, the lake, and then curves back around into Henderson and finishes at the start-finish line.
And it's still relay format?
Still relay format, 9 runners per team. Only thing that's different that Baker to Vegas had, you had to have a follow vehicle behind the runner to provide support. Since we cannot have any motorized vehicles on the bike path, it's a bicyclist. So we have a bicyclist that's behind each runner. This last October, and the other thing that's different with this is it's not law enforcement only. We are first responders. We are doing law enforcement and fire and paramedics and doctors. And this next year, we're looking at the possibility of adding military to it. 9 on a team. You have a team captain. You have a cyclist behind him. Starts in the morning, finishes in the afternoon, award ceremony that night, finish it all up in one day.
And you're coming up on year 2 of this?
Year 2. We had 40 teams the first year, and we're looking at possibly doubling that. We know that it's a bike trail. We know that we can't do what Baker to Vegas did by putting 200 teams out there because we're not shutting down the bicycle trail. So we might have to limit it at 100, but we're looking hopefully to double it this year. If anybody's interested, they can find it at cpaf.org. That's California Police Athletic Federation.org, and it's on their website.
And to kind of start wrapping this up, law enforcement drew you back in.
Yes, they did.
How long you been back at it?
I've been at Burbank Airport for the last 13 and a half years.
And you still enjoying it?
I do. I went in it with the idea. I sat down with the chief at the hiring interview. And this is really cocky on my part, but that's what happens when you get old. I sat down and he said, "Are you coming here to Burbank Airport just to receive a check?" And I told him, I said, "Chief, you know my background, 25 years in SWAT, all the involvements of all the details I've been involved." I said, "It's your fault if you don't use me and abuse me." I said, "I'm here to help you." And I have since brought in and made Burbank Airport a lot safer than it was. I brought in a number of different programs. We now have rifles at the checkpoints. We now have active shooter training that I put together. We now have a number of different things for the officers that they didn't have, even coming from the agencies that they came from, that they never had. And that's what I look forward to. When I retired from LAPD, I didn't want to just stop and do nothing. I mean, I have a lot of outside interests, but I want to stay motivated. And the cooking kept me motivated. And law enforcement, I wasn't really done with that. So I wanted to go on with something else. And I suggest anybody that's in law enforcement that's thinking about retiring, you've got to have something in mind on what you're doing and where you're going. And even if it's just to retire from a major agency and go somewhere else, whether you stay in law enforcement or go like I did, where you enjoy cooking, if you enjoy golf, then go learn what makes a club, or go apply for a job at a golf course. Become a golf instructor. You know, if you like flying kites, go take a class in flying kites. When I took my culinary class, I was the oldest one in it at 56, the oldest one. And that didn't bother me at all, because I'm learning something again. I'm learning. We can never stop learning no matter how old you get. It's just the only thing that will stop you is yourself.
I can't say anything better or more to that. So I'm going to thank you for your time, sir.
It's my pleasure, Paul.
Appreciate you being here.
You bet.
I appreciate you watching. But before you go, if you like the video, please hit that subscribe button. Also, any comments are appreciated. Thank you.